I know the Bears game left a bad taste in your mouth. All the big games makes you think, this Packer team, they don't have the goods. I'm telling you, this Packers team is still really, really good. I'm going to explain on today's Locked On Packers.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the #1 Packers podcast on the internet. And the show for fans who know what happened, they want to know why and how. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com today to get $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel.com. Let's do this. You're annoyed. You've seen this team cower in big games, play tight to open. You saw them get caught between trying to go for it and not really knowing what they should do against the Chicago Bears. They lose a game where the defense absolutely implodes on the final play because of poor coaching. Unbelievable stuff. I'm here to tell you, the Green Bay Packers are really good. They're really, really good. They are so much better than they were last year. They are so much better than they were last year. And I understand in the biggest games this year, this team did not do what they did in Detroit, did not do what they did against Kansas City last year at home, did not go into Minnesota and do what they did. Now, they didn't have to win against the Bears. They didn't have to win against Minnesota. And by the time they played Minnesota, their chance at the division was over. So they weren't really playing anything for these last 2 weeks. I think we need to say that. They won 11 games. By estimated wins, so by the underlying numbers from FTN Fantasy, this was a 12.7 win team, a 13 win team by quality. If they had won all of the games that they lost by one score this year, that's all the games except one. Except the Lions game. That's the only game that was not a one-score game. We'd be talking about the volatility of one-score games and how at the end of the year, that stuff is not really going to be translatable. If they'd have won 16 games, we'd be going, they're really a 12, 13 win team. Obviously, you only win the games when you win them. They only get to count, and the Packers are the 7 seed, and all of that stuff matters, and their performances in the big games, the slow starts, all that stuff matters. But adjusting for schedule, so by DVOA, defense adjusted value over average, how do you perform relative to a league average team against the teams that you have played? The Packers are third in the NFL in total DVOA. Third, ahead of the Eagles, ahead of the Vikings, ahead of the Chiefs, ahead of the Bills. They are third. Fourth in offense, 7th on defense. Do you know how many teams are top 10 in offense and defense? 3. The Ravens, the Lions, and the Packers. This is a really stinking good football team that in big games this year has not performed to the standard that they have played to in some other games. But what Aaron Schatz talks about all the time is that it is actually not necessarily how you perform against the good teams. It is often how you perform against the inferior teams that proves a team's value. Because think of the Ravens, by the way, number 1 in DVOA. They lost to the Raiders. They lost to the Browns. Now, They beat the Steelers. They beat the crap out of the Texans. They beat the Bills. They have some big wins too in big games. That's why they're number one. But the Packers took care of their business. In all the games that Jordan Love started and finished, the Packers took care of business against every team they were supposed to. And in almost every case, I think the Jaguars game is probably the only one where you look at it and go, they should have beat the crap out of that team, and they just barely beat that team. In every other game, they did the thing that they were supposed to do. And in none of the games that they lost did they play their best and lose anyway. And that to me is the key. There have been times over the years where I have watched the Packers play their best game and it just wasn't good enough. They just weren't good enough. They didn't have the talent. Unfortunately, it was a hallmark in a lot of ways for the Aaron Rodgers era. Or they played a really good game and then two incredibly boneheaded mistakes happened. Now, this is the margin in the playoffs. But guess what? The OPI call that overturns a touchdown that cost the Packers 4 points in a game against the Lions that ultimately gets decided by 3 points. That call can just as easily go the other way in the postseason. It's a 1-game sample. It's 4 in the Packers case, potentially 1-game samples. Over the course of the season, this team has proven to be one of the best in the NFL. If I told you this year's offense is better and more efficient than last year's offense, what would you say? No way, right? No way. Jordan Love, more efficient this year than he was last year. Now, there's a little bit of the Aaron Rodgers-itis, like 2018 Aaron Rodgers, where he really avoided mistakes for stretches of the season by not putting the ball in harm's way ever, by not trying to do anything. But don't forget, the whole first half of the season counts, and he was very productive. Post-bye. Like, they scored 30 points every week for a month. That stuff matters. And you say, whoa, the running game is better. Well, yeah, that matters too. The reason the offense at the end of the season took off was because Aaron Jones, in large part, was because of Aaron Jones and his ability to keep this team on schedule. Here's the thing. Value-wise, like when you look at the numbers, like EPA per play, DVOA, running is just so much less valuable than passing that it can't really make up the delta. So yes, this is a better running team than it was last year. On balance, not even close. But Jordan Love has also been more efficient this year than last year. So it's not just that. And then the defense, I mean, you guys, in the last month of the season, and let's say last 5 weeks of the season, the Packers lost to Tommy DeVito in New York because the offense looked like garbage and the defense couldn't stop Tommy DeVito. Tommy DeVito, a borderline NFL player, a guy who's more famous, whose agent is more famous than him, he's more famous because people know what his agent looks like than what he does on the football field. Tommy DeVito. This was one of the 5 worst defenses in the NFL last year. They were cheeks. Baker Mayfield, perfect passer rating. That's the game that got Joe Barry fired. That happened in the last month of the season. That's what the defense looked like. And after that game, you go, there's just no way this team, like the team had to win out after that to get into the playoffs. And a week later, after they get absolutely like blowtorched, like Home Alone, open the door, blowtorched by Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young has, at least at the time, by far the best game of his NFL career. That was that team. Don't romanticize what we saw that team do because of how the season ended. Remember that holistically, that team was wildly inconsistent. They didn't do what this team does, and that is win the games they're supposed to win. I think there are a lot of reasons for that. We could do the whole show on that. This team is learning how to be the favorite. They end the week against Minnesota, going into Minnesota in a game that the Vikings have to win as the favorite. As the favorite. And they no-show to open the game. Guess where they are now? 4.5-point underdogs on the road as the 7 seed, and they're back in their more familiar mode as a nobody believes in us team. And by the way, great stat. Aaron Nagler pointed this out on Twitter. This is the second youngest playoff team ever. Do you know who the first is? Last year's Packers team. We know what they are capable of. They know what they are capable of. They can beat anybody, and this is a really, really good football team. Don't let what happened last week and the week before that. I was begging you to understand these games do not matter as much to the players as they do to the people watching. They proved it. The Packers can beat anybody. One of the best teams in the NFL. Don't forget that. Now let's talk about this Jalen Hurts mess next on Locked On Packers. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are just plain better with FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. What are you waiting for? The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. Packers right now, 4.5-point underdogs. This line has moved a lot. Started at 4.5, went to 4, went to 3.5, moves back to 4.5. I don't know what that means for the Jalen Hurts situation. We're going to dig into all of that. Visit the website for FanDuel to get all the latest betting lines and around the league. Go to FanDuel.com to join today to get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. There was a moment when it seemed like the Philadelphia Eagles were really not going to have Jalen Hurts on Sunday. And he was in concussion protocol coming out of the weekend. And there was this idea from Eagles fans especially to say, they're just slow playing him. He's fine. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. An independent specialist has to clear you. The team cannot clear you from concussion protocol. Theoretically. If this were all just fine and he was going to sit anyway, and it's not a big deal, they could have cleared him last week if he was just ready to go. Like the game, like there is a group of people acting like if the Packers and the Eagles played last Sunday, that Hurts would have played. And that is just not true. It's just not. There is a process for all of this. And it involves a ramp-up process where you have to practice and then be evaluated. There's a ramp-up. Okay, how did you deal with the ramp-up? There's, Romeo Doubs missed several weeks. Jalen Hurts has now missed several weeks. They start Kenny Pickett against the Cowboys week 17 because Jalen Hurts missed the week before. So a full week of practice missed Kenny Pickett. Then another full week you're missing. And you come out and the Eagles do what they do in the last week. And now maybe he practices on Thursday. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he practices on Wednesday. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe you'll wake up today and he'll be cleared. He still will not have played football in 3 weeks by the time the Packers play on Sunday. And the rust factor here is bigger than it might be for some other quarterbacks for a number of reasons. What the Packers did to Hurts in the first game was say, we're not going to rush you. We're not going to blitz you. And I still think we'll talk about the plan part of this in a second, but it was, we're going to make Jalen Hurts read things out. And they had some good plans. It was week 1. So they had some pressure plans and those kinds of things. But he also threw 2 interceptions. And I would say nearly threw 2 more. And the Packers were able to get a fumble on it. And so they were able to create the negative plays. This offense is 13th in DVOA, despite Saquon Barkley allegedly being an MVP candidate, despite A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and this incredible offensive line. They're a fine offense. Speaking of playing in big games, they did not show up against Baltimore, for example. The Packers are a defense that specializes in creating big plays. If you're not going to be a successful team down to down, the Packers are the defense that is going to love to play against you. Now, because they can run the ball with Saquon Barkley, that's pretty useful. The Packers' run defense has been a top 10 group all year, and I expect them to play like a top 10 group on Sunday. Get a full go with Edgerrin Cooper. Quay Walker, they're optimistic, is going to be back. We'll check practice reports this week. But here's the stat that sticks out to me. I saw this on social media, and forgive me for I was not able to go back and find where it came from. But 25% of Jalen Hurts' throws, he leads the league in this stat, 25% in what's called non-targets, according to True Media. It's Dennis Selman is the guy who put this on social. I found the tweet. Almost 25%. So 24.4% of plays ended in either sack, a throwaway, or a scramble. So it's supposed to be a pass, and the ball does not get thrown for whatever reason. The most in the league, Jalen Hurts. And the 3 players right above him are rookies: Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. And right above him, it's Russell Wilson, Bryce Young, Will Levis, CJ Stroud, Gardner Minshew. Not exactly the who's who of the NFL quarterback world. And so this was the plan the last time, which was make Jalen Hurts play quarterback. Make Jalen Hurts play quarterback. Make him go under center, play action if you're going to do that, and read it out. Make him go 5-step, 7-step, and read it out. Don't let him beat you as a scrambler, which the Packers did an excellent job of the first time around. I had my criticisms of the plan to kind of mush rush Jalen Hurts, but they corralled him as a runner, something they did also with Anthony Richardson until the very end when the game was kind of out of reach, frankly. Jalen Hurts, 13 carries for just 33 yards, had a long of 8 on the day. Now, he did have some first downs, did push it, those kinds of things. But the plan is related to the potential rust. Because if you're going to make Jalen Hurts read it out, the Packers are a better disguised team than they were in week 1 by a lot. They're showing a lot more simulated pressures than they were in week 1. They're blitzing a lot more than they did in week 1. Now, yes, Jair Alexander's not going to be out there, but in some ways that plays to Green Bay's favor because they said, hey, Jair Alexander, go cover A.J. Brown, and he couldn't because it was an ice rink and no one could cover anybody. But this is, if you're going to play that style against a quarterback coming off 3 weeks of not playing and who has this tendency, especially when there's nothing there, he will roll to his right and either scramble or he will throw the ball away or he'll take a sack. That's good for Green Bay because you're going to be a little bit more hesitant with that time off. So even if Jalen Hurts does play, and again, I expect him to play, they released Ian Book, who they had signed to the practice squad and then signed to the active roster when Jalen Hurts, it was clear, was not going to be able to play. He's gone now. So all the tea leaf reading here points to Jalen Hurts being full go. But is he going to be full go? Is he going to be as comfortable with plays like the tush push? Is he going to be as comfortable taking off and running, or is he going to want to get rid of the ball? If you get a hit on him early, I'm not saying a dirty hit, I'm not saying a hit to the head, I'm just saying a big hit, hit him. Is he going to go, man, I hope that doesn't happen again, because I don't want to slam my head against the turf? Like that is a human thing. I'm not saying hurt anybody, okay? Let me be 100% clear about that. But it's just like with an ACL or an ankle or whatever. You're nervous about the stability of that thing, and we're talking about someone's brain. And so now now I want to get the ball out quicker because I really don't want to get hit. Those kinds of things. Or I roll out rather than take off. I'm just gonna duck this out of bounds. I think there are tack-on effects here that we can't dismiss. And because of the way the Packers are wanting to play him, that to me is critical here. Now let's talk about the plan. We're going to talk about the offensive plan and defensive plan from week one. Are there things we can glean from that? Are there things that they can run back in this game? We'll talk about that next. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to turn your sports opinion into cash with daily fantasy player projections. Simply pick more or less on player stats like passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can book your picks in less than 60 seconds, and whether you're looking for a flex play or boost for your payout, want your cash quickly, PrizePicks got you covered on all accounts. Here's a special offer for our Locked On Packers listeners. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks and the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly when you play the first $5 lineup. You don't even need to win. PrizePicks, run your game. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends at Rocket Money. Have you ever found a subscription, probably an app, something like that you're paying for that you forgot you were paying for? It's definitely happened to me. It's happened with apps. It's happened a magazine subscription. Nothing weird. Don't be weird. And Rocket Money is here to help. Doesn't matter. It could be whatever you want. Rocket Money is here to make sure you are only paying for the things that you want to pay for. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, plus helps you monitor your spending, helps lower bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when all of the app's premium features are working. I need that subscription tracker. I'm not great about it. I'm not great about keeping track of all that stuff, so that's why Rocket Money can help. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen. Now for your second listen, go find Locked On NFL Now with 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. So what did the Packers do in that week 1 game? Well, we talked about some of the defensive plans there. Do not let Jalen Hurts beat you on the ground with his legs. That worked. They played a lot of single high coverage to defend against Saquon Barkley. Now, until that last drive, that had middling success. But Saquon, I know he ended up going over 100 yards, but we're talking about 4.5 yards per carry against Saquon Barkley, who averaged almost 6 yards per carry this year. Actually, a decent job. Okay. And this run defense is even better because of guys like Edgerrin Cooper, You're getting Quay Walker back. You're not having to rely on Isaiah McDuffie and Eric Wilson as much. Now Evan Williams in the game, if he can come back this week. We'll see if he's able to do that. Javon Bullard now as an overhang defender instead of as a deep safety. The better run defender there. So that gives you a lot more options and flexibility. Some of that stuff is going to have to change. Now, they did play some man coverage. We'll see if they can continue to do that. I expect to see more quarters in this game. They've been a lot of cover 2 to try and stop the run. I expect to see more of that because they're not going to be able to play their man coverage. So, okay, cover 2, you have your corners who can come up and play with force and not let Saquon get the ball outside. I think certainly that's something that we're going to see in this game for the Packers. And they're going to have to be judicious with the blitz. And when they do it, it's going to have to be big blitzes. That they need to be more aggressive in some of these situations. On first and second down, I understand. Rush 4, must rush. Don't let Jalen Hurts escape. And when he escapes, make sure he goes right. Because the only thing he's going to do when he rolls right is either take off or throw the ball out of bounds. That's it. That's all he does. Everyone knows this. Like, that is the book on Jalen Hurts right now. And coming off a 3-week hiatus, that's even more the case. Now, offensively, I think is an interesting one. Because the Packers, they felt like, clearly, they had a good plan for this Vic Fangio defense. And this Vic Fangio defense does not do the thing that has been the kryptonite for the Packers for a lot of the years. They do not play a ton of man coverage. Now, what they do is they play a ton of zone coverage that cashes out, kind of like man coverage in certain circumstances, or on the backside is man coverage. It's man-matchy zone coverage. But when they're in too high, that's quarters, it's cover 6. Well, the Packers have plenty of answers for stuff like that. Now, they're really good when they want to man you up. But they play a middling amount of man coverage this year based on the stats and the charting from Field Vision and Match Quarters, our pal over at Match Quarters. And so I don't expect them to come in with the plan where all of a sudden they're going to change everything they do in a playoff game. I think that's unreasonable to expect anyone to do. You know, we talked about the ins and out of this Fangio defense with Cody Alexander from Match Quarters. And it really is only working unless you have Vic Fangio. Like, it's not working for a lot of these other teams that are trying to play this style of defense. They also don't have Quinion Mitchell and Darius Slay and Jalen Carter. Remember, the last time these two teams played, Cooper DeJean did not suit up for the Eagles. And the Packers were rotating their offensive linemen. Like, Sean Ryan is the guy now. He's been playing really good of lately, really, really good in the run game in particular. I think you're going to see this Packers team. They're going to want to run the ball, especially against a Eagles defense that wants to play too high coverage. I think you're going to see more Jaden Reed, although it's going to be a focus from the Eagles to stop Jaden Reed because he lit them up the last time these two teams played. So what are the counters? When the Packers came out against the Cowboys, it was every counter to the counter. It was every play off the play. Hey, out of this formation, in this down and distance, we like to run this. And they had a double move off of it, knowing that this was going to be really well scouted. And it worked. They got the run game going early. I think you're going to see the Packers try and do that, establish the run. If they win the toss, they are taking the ball. And they're going to take their shots. I think we see Matt LaFleur try and do a lot of the same things. They were trying to attack an aggressive, but still a zone coverage team. And they were able to find some opportunities. Whether it was Tucker Kraft on some play action concepts, whether it was Jaden Reed on deep over routes. And Jordan Love is going to have to make some second reaction plays. He's going to have to make some plays outside of the pocket. He did that in the first game. Now, the first game, their approach was let's play as sloppy as possible and see what we can do. I don't, obviously I don't think that's going to be a thing that they hope to repeat. But it was penalties, it was self-inflicted wounds, it was drops, it was weird Matt LaFleur decision making. Like, you can't come out and play as conservatively as you did the first time in this game. Points at a premium. I guess it's game one. Braden Narvison, like, there was a missed field goal in there. Those things matter too. And you're playing on an ice rink. So I do think from an approach standpoint, there are things we can take away. I think a lot of the approaches are going to carry over. And we'll see what happens when these teams actually get a chance to game plan for what we're actually seeing on the field. Like week one, you're doing a lot of guessing. We think they're going to do this. We think they're going to do this. We think they're going to do this. Now we have a full year to have seen what they're going to do. What's interesting is I don't know that much is going to change. And that is a credit to both of these coaching staffs who really had a good bead for what these teams were going to try to do to attack them. It's why we got such an entertaining game, frankly. I think we're going to have another entertaining game coming our way on Sunday afternoon. We have a crossover Thursday coming tomorrow. We may get another interview on Friday. I wanted to take this show to talk about some scheme stuff. I want to talk about this Eagles defense in more depth. And maybe we get someone like Cody Alexander to come back on the show, talk Vic Fangio and those principles on Friday. Maybe something that we need to do to dig into some scheme here as we get you ready for Packers Eagles. All right, follow me on the social medias. Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast, Locked On Packers. Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Go leave a rating, a review would really help us out. I appreciate it. And we'll be live on YouTube after the game on Sunday so you can stay Locked On Packers.